Welcome to the Exchange Coffee Podcast, part of the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network, where coffee people talk to coffee people about coffee and things coffee adjacent. The Exchange is brought to you by Kavoya Specialty Coffee and is hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey. This is episode 39, and the topic is coffee blending, including a recipe or two and some discussion around the economics of blending, which is, of course, topical for everyone at the moment. And now, here they are, Mark and Todd.
We're doing Blending 2.0, a throwback to an episode that we took a run at in season 1 of The Exchange, back in the days of Olam Specialty Coffee.
Right.
You can even imagine that. And yeah, we have a bunch of new stuff to get into. I know you are always coming in prepared and have an itinerary and an agenda for us. So I'm personally very excited about that. I guess my question to you is, given we're getting into Blending 2.0, where do you want to begin?
Well, let's get into why blend. What's with all of the origins available and single origin and single varietal, why would you even bother blending? And I would love to hear your list of those reasons, Todd.
Sure. Well, I would love to start by just asking the question, isn't all coffee a blend?
That's a good question. If it were a single varietal from one farm, would that be a blend?
But it's a blend of trees.
Well, of course. I mean, let's not get ridiculous. But if it was in the traditional wine sense, where you have multiple varietals on a farm and you're harvesting together, that's a field blend. Yes, most coffee farms would be de facto field blend coffees because they're not. I mean, the separation of varietal in harvesting is somewhat recent in the scheme of things.
Sure. No, I simply poke fun. But no, I mean, I think that most of the reasons I would cite and that I find myself talking with roasters about, as to why to blend are age old, right? I mean, we're especially in a very high market where, diffs and, the basis price of coffee are very high. You're kind of constantly looking to figure out a way to hit your price points, especially if you find yourself in a wholesale business or selling into something like grocery type of space. So creating a haven that is flexible and that allows you to be opportunistic, to allow you the flexibility to hit your cup profile or your quality targets while simultaneously being opportunistic around pricing. That's a huge reason to blend, beyond just having, some sort of marketable identity that remains consistent to the customer. Think of the famous espresso blends in the specialty space, Hairbender,
sure,
or Black Cat, or some of the others, having something that's a moniker that lives beyond just the seasonal shifts of the coffee beneath it.
Well, I brought it into 3 buckets. And if we could discuss the buckets, I look at blending for 3 reasons. The first reason is blending to appeal to the largest audience possible. And that would be, the McDonald's blend, the Hairbender, for example, or, grocery blends. How can I capture the largest audience? And within that, there are reasons why you do that. The second bucket being economics, and there's a subset of this that is a reason not to blend, but to stay within a certain price band because you have certain customers. And thirdly is blending for quality. These are coffees that actually improve as you blend them rather than become a lesser than the sum of the parts.
That's interesting. I'm pretty excited for that last bucket. I don't know if I vibe with you there, but yeah, let's start with the first bucket. So we're talking about wide appeal,
right?
Mass appeal. I'll cite a beloved Providence-based blend from a local roaster here, mass appeal. You're looking for something that appeals to all. I mean, it's interesting. How do you see it? Do you see it as more a gateway that opens the door for everyone, or are you talking something that doesn't push anyone away? And do you see my distinction there? Like, a lot of times single origin coffees are a bit too assertive.
Well, they're making a statement. And I would say, comparing it to the wine industry where I live here, the largest selling wine is a Chardonnay, a buttery Chardonnay. It's a very simple profile, and that kind of buttery, sweet, rich taste, everybody can agree with that. Versus a Sauvignon Blanc, which can be extremely floral or extremely acidic, like real like pomelo or real lemon. That works for some palates, and for other palates, it's a massive turnoff. So I would say that bringing this back to coffee, coffee that are high acid, herby, super herby, become risky coffees. In some mass markets or grocery, the worst selling coffee would be a bright washed Yirgacheffe, because it's catering to a very small sliver that appreciates these screaming acidic coffees. And conversely, like really herby Sumatras, or really savory, like you have in Kenya, those blackberry Kenyans, and then you have those tomato Kenyans. And I happen to love a savory tomato Kenya, or out of El Salvador, a Pacamara, where it gets that kind of caramelized onion flavor. I love that, but I can see where that would not work for a lot of people. And I would argue that if you're going to try to cater to the largest taste, preference out there in the United States, because Asia has a very different flavor profile, I would say it's chocolate, sweet, and rich. Those, you will never go wrong with sweetness and chocolate. But I think you start rolling dice when you get into very fermenty, very, very fruity, very acidic, very savory.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a distinct line between something that is exciting to taste and something that is exciting to drink. And for your customers that, will finish a whole pot of coffee or a Chemex, or, want 3 to 5 cups in a day, for the most part, it's not going to be these bombastic co-ferments or anaerobic processed, natural, boozy kind of coffees that people are looking to sip on all morning and into the afternoon. So point well taken.
And admittedly, Todd, I'm not a beer guy. You and Mike are, but I would compare these blends to, like, I'm assuming the term is session beer. Is that like meant to just be something that most people will like and they'll drink it all day long?
Sure. I mean, I think a session beer they were sort of launched, that I understand it, though Mike jump in here, as a response to the sort of big double, triple IPA type of
super hoppy
beers. It got really big and sort of hip, and people started to find, wow, I'm suffering from rot gut, and these are it feels like a workout having this beer. My metabolism is going crazy just trying to deal with it. It's, and you wind up having beers that are, 1,000 calories,
wow,
per can or something like that.
Is that right? Are there beers that are 1,000 calories?
Yeah. It can be 800 plus. But yeah, so, you're talking about a beer also that might be 8+% alcohol by volume, which is almost more in line with a wine.
Yeah, barley wine.
And you see this kind of rise in beers that are not lagers and pilsners and traditional German beers that were light and 4% and really refreshing and sort of meant for that type of, day drinker all day kind of thing, but something that has the hop characteristics and also is something approachable and that you'd want more than one of. And yeah, I think, the blend in coffee goes well with that, but also, to that point, beer like Narragansett that is made in, well, I shouldn't say this. Is it made in Rhode Island, Mike?
No, I believe it's in New York.
Yeah, the flagship lager has been made in New York since.
But we're not going to tell anybody about it.
Oh, we're gonna edit this.
Yeah, it's a secret.
Okay, but yeah, like to that point, like having things that are approachable, drinkable. Having a coffee that's sweet and round and refreshing and invites the next sip. I mean, that's a total reason for blending. And yeah, I think that there are lots and lots of single origin coffees that are excluded from consideration for blending in this purpose, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I do think as you pointed out earlier, it's a gateway drug, and I look at like Pete's coffee strategy back in the day. You had the Major Dickinson's blend, which was that approachable, easy, simple profile. And then if you went to a Pete's location, you can get a Zimbabwe, you can get a really acidy Kenya, but the anchor was that one blend. So it becomes your signature at some point as well.
For sure. Now, the second bucket, to shift along, you wanted to talk about economics.
Economics. So this would be especially relevant if you were getting a Costco account or getting a Walmart account or something mass grocery where you have to quote for a longer period of time, and you need to maintain a coffee that tastes good and stays within that price band. This is not trying to blend to save money necessarily. It's trying to maximize the best quality you can get within that price band, so that you start to whittle away options. Like, obviously, if you were going to do a mass grocery blend at a reasonable price, things like Kenyans are probably out and Konas are probably out and Jamaicas. So you have to start thinking what works and what doesn't work. But I want to separate that from people that are blending to cut costs, to make more money. I think that is a different strategy, and you use different coffees. But in this case, like, you can get a dominant characteristic coffee, let's say a Frejanes Guatemala, like an orange juicy tangerine Guatemala, and cut that with a higher physical defect but no taste defect Brazil, which Brazil to me always is like this coffee flavored coffee base flavor that you can build upon. And when you marry those two together, you get all of the characteristics of that tangerine juice and this underlying base of coffee flavored coffee, and there's no off flavors. It's sweet and it's reasonably priced, versus if you just did a pure Frejanes in the marketplace.
But don't you think that blending and the economics of blending all come from even the days where people were cutting in non-coffee products? I'm still blown away that I go to the grocery store and every now and then I'll just spend a little time, just for entertainment's sake, looking at the coffee packages and the sort of wild things that they say, the claims, because there's absolutely zero accountability in marketing. There are still packages on the shelf that say 100% coffee. Does that not conjure the question, why? Right? To me, that says that at a point, if a company were obligated, this would say 80% coffee or 50% coffee, right? And so what would the other things be there? Would it be...
Well, chicory, yeah.
Chicory root? Would it be sawdust? like, I mean, for a long time, like, parchment was cut into ground coffee, right? So, like, I mean, just absolutely crazy to me. So, I mean, I guess my point of view has always been, well, wow. I mean, yeah, the kind of economics of blending have always been based in lowering the price, right? From a better is the enemy of good enough type of mentality. I'm not suggesting that's cool or that that's a practical solution in the specialty space, because I think, to your point and how you describe this, there's a lot more people that are their brand in their cafes or in their wholesale accounts is the whole idea and notion is assertive coffees with character, right? In specialty, clean, sweet, has unique qualities. And so they're trying in a way to have character and identity, but also be able to sell this at a wholesale price that allows for them into a grocery type business, or to retail in these bigger box stores or what have you. So But it's interesting. I don't find that is all that different from the race to the bottom mentality of like, hey, how much coffee do we actually need to put in this to call it coffee?
Because I would argue on that side that there is a new wave of roasters that are adding things to coffee, whether it be like MCT oil or some of the mushroom coffees that are mixing Arabica with mushrooms, or they're unfazed by it. Yeah, that's an interesting one to me.
Yeah, but that's like more of an alchemy thing. That's
Right.
not like, hey, how do we have an awesome coffee product? That's like, how do we have a product that involves sorcery
Right.
to get people's money out of their pockets magically,
Right.
as quickly as possible? At least from where I sit.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Maybe this whole segment is to be edited out, but I think by Mike's face that
He's getting nervous. He's touching his collar.
yeah.
Well, so I would say though on this blending for economics point, there is a brand, and I won't out them because I want to, because I think they're great, that I have been fascinated by for decades, and their blend is arguably great. It is a great blend. It is great as espresso. It's great as a brewed coffee. It's great in any method I've tested this. And when I actually learned what the blend was, it contained kind of mid-range coffees. I would say premium, not specialty and not commercial, and I've deconstructed the blend and tried the parts, but put together, it was as good as real good specialty grade single origins. So sometimes the alchemy of blending, the sum of the parts are far better than the individual components. And in this particular company, this got me down this road of, maybe blending, in wine, most of the great wines, most of the collectible wines, they're all blends. There's very few single varietals that you're putting down for lengths of time. And coffee arguably should be doing the same thing. And in the case of this particular company, they've pulled it off in a way that has impressed me and has caused me to experiment with playing with some commercial grades mixed with some mid grades and see if I could build a better mousetrap. And I think that's where blending is done correctly, where I think you race to the bottom, which a lot of people do. I think the biggest mistake roasters make out there is saying, well, I dark roast coffee, so nobody's going to know if I put really highly defective coffee in or really past crop. And I would say I've had my life's share of the race to the bottom coffees. And the thing I can say unequivocally about them is they all taste the same. They are all unremarkable, and they are all a drag on your brand name. So if you feel like you're getting one over on the consumer, you're not. And I would rather just not sell into those markets than go down this road of homogenizing across all brands a taste that is universally boring.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're saying that in this particular instance, or even in others, you've had coffees that you feel like, wow, the combination of these 3 to 4 coffees has actually exceeds one exceptional single station or single region, single farm coffee.
Yeah.
In that it's so complete, or in that it, yeah, okay.
It hits all the points. Now, would I enter it in Cup of Excellence? No. But would I always reach for it? Yes. 100% of the time I would go back to it because I know it's great and I know it's something I will always enjoy no matter what So I got obsessed with these, I always called them Swiss Army knife coffees, a blend that can do everything. I think that it's the 3-in-1 shampoo out there that it's just going to be great no matter what you do. There's a talent to pull that off. And a tip of the old cap to those who are actually making that happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I've had great blends. I don't know that I would say like, oh, wow, this is better than a really distinct single origin coffee. That's probably just a point of view thing, but I do think from like a complete coffee, always pleasing type of standpoint, these are really special things. I also think like there's something so emotional at its core in coffee that if you have something that can touch like that broad, like this is quintessential type of
Sure.
emotion to the coffee drinker, without a doubt, you're going to, win a lot of faithful customers,
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to me, part of what I think is, almost a missed opportunity, to build on the three buckets. I know this is sort of taking things in a progression here, but
Right.
one of the great opportunities that exists for companies that do have blends, and I've worked with a lot of companies that either made at some point decided, because we've sort of transitioned as a segment of the industry from very single origin focused to very accepting of blends within recent years.
Sure.
Right. There's a lot of companies that were sort of staunchly opposed to the blend, but have found that, they're able to invest from a marketing, messaging, and core values standpoint through their blends identities, whether that like is really quintessentially expressed in the coffee itself or just in the brand, right? The name,
Mm-hmm.
how it's presented, the lifestyle associations, et cetera. But there's like a huge opportunity from a marketing standpoint around a blend where, you can market the story of your company in a very forward way, where if you're, kind of marketing just the coffee itself, there's not the space to do that.
Right.
Right. I'm sure you must have customers coming to mind immediately who, that core flagship blend is the thing that really expresses to their customers who they are. And again, not by the taste profile or, the accessible price point or what have you, but just because maybe of its name identity or how they market it in imagery. And
Well, yeah, and it becomes the cornerstone of their business. I used to give presentations back in the day where I would proclaim that the one advantage a small to medium-sized roaster has over like a Starbucks or a Peet's or a Nestle is that you can find great micro lot coffees and it will stand out head and shoulders above anything those guys can do because their scale doesn't allow for it. And while I believe that's still a valid point, what I believe is missing from that business strategy is that you become known for having a lot of great things that are seasonal and fleeting, but you don't have anything that's timeless and classic. And that's where a blend comes into play. It becomes your signature on your business. And I think that my recommendations back in those days is half baked because I think while that was your way to differentiate yourself from those larger companies, you still needed something that would make you timeless and go on forever. And that's where I think the blend plays a role.
Yeah, I would say to all the naysayers, of which I know there are some, I know there's listeners who are like staunchly single origin. We have everything we need. And, I would argue that actually you in most cases, most all the cases, and I have great companies that I work with who I love, who, only sell single coffees. They do not blend coffees in their roaster. But to my point at the gate, all coffees are a blend in some way, shape, or form. And most companies find that, 60, 70, the lion's share percentage of their business is in this space of fully rounded, crushable coffees, blended or not, that make up, the vast majority of their sales, both, at retail, through wholesale. And it really would pay to think about this through the lens of all these buckets, right?
Right.
Through the lens of, hey, how can I make something exceptional without inefficiency? economically speaking, especially in the environment we're in right now. How can I make something that is so exceptional and so reliable that I have customers who join a mail order or make a regular visit to the cafe, or buy this stuff, set it and forget it, and years later they're still taking deliveries of this coffee, when in reality maybe some of its constituents have cycled many times over. Or take it to an extreme, like how do I get to the point where like I have a line of merchandise that isn't even just for my brand, but for my core, that's like sort of the identity of which is around my core blends identity, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here. So
final bucket is blending for quality. And I'll tell you what I mean by this particular point. I call it the Cadbury Fruit Nut Bar blend, but it's a classic blend. So if you were to pull a shot of just Ethiopian natural, or just Colombia or Guat, or just Brazil, you're going to get a decent shot. But the classic blend of the fruit coming from the natural Ethiopia, the nut coming from the Brazil, and the chocolate coming from the Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, that combination, that classic blend that everyone seems to riff on, is arguably better than those individual components, because it's touching all of the pleasure centers. It's hitting everything. I'm a huge collector of blend recipes. I love, I'll go somewhere and I'll fall in love with the blend, and I have to know what it is, and I engage the roaster in conversation. Why did you come up with this? How did you come up with this? And so some of the blends I'll mention that did this for me. One was the Azahar Cafe in Bogota, where I had, a lot of single origin or single varietal coffees out of different regions. So I had like a Nariño, and I had a Huila and a Cauca, and I love all of these. But I had a blend that was a Santander 60%, 40% Nariño. And it was that dark chocolate kind of plummy kind of stone fruit from the Santander region, and then this bright floral from the Nariño. And it was an unbelievably good blend that, again, you wouldn't just find a coffee there in Colombia, or it'd be tough to find a coffee that nailed both of those flavors together. Now, I could have just enjoyed a really flowery Nariño, and I could have enjoyed just a heavy, bassy Santander, but that combo worked for me. And then when I was in Europe a couple years ago, a lot of roasters, because they use different coffees for blending than we do, just regionally given. And a common blend that I saw there that I've never seen in the US was kind of like a premium grade, kind of mediocre Rwanda blended with a brighter Colombia. And that blend was fantastic. And I would never even consider, well, for one, we don't really import a lot of kind of like premium Rwandas. They're all pretty high end, but that was the base of some of their blends, not really playing the role of a Brazil, but playing the role of maybe a Honduras or a Peru. It was kind of filling that vacuum for them. But that flavor is something that stuck with me. Everywhere I had it, I was like, wow, this is great. What is it? And they would mention that blend, and it was in different quantities. And I was very impressed by it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure you see that quite a bit in Europe, where the proximity to Africa would lend historically, roasters greater ease to getting coffees that were the base components coming out of East Africa rather than Central America like we're accustomed to here.
Yeah, and then one more blend, final one, was when I was on the SCAA back in the day board. I used to, when that time, I think it was like a 7-year stretch where we were in Seattle. Remember those years?
Oh, yeah.
So I was hosting because we were very concerned about new members and feeling out of place and not knowing what to do. So I was hosting a 6 a.m. run. I think it was 7 a.m. run through the streets of Seattle. So we would get together in the morning and we would do an espresso crawl as runners, and we would hit 8 shops and get shots. And then we would talk about the shots as we ran to the next.
So you had 8 shots of espresso.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we hit all the classics, David Schomer's, we would hit Vita, we would hit Lighthouse, all the ones that you can rattle off your head. We would do these over the course of the show. So if you came tomorrow, it was a new route and new shop spots. And of course, the two blends that stood out at the time was David Schomer, and he was using a lot of like monsoon Malabars out of India and kind of an Indian base. And it was a very intense shot that was completely signature to him. I didn't know anybody who was doing this outside of Josima. And that was a unique blend. But the one that was the crowd pleaser always was Vita. Every time we left that, people would be like, wow, that was a great shot. What was that? And when I got to talk to the people there, again, the blend was something I never would have considered. And they don't do this blend anymore, so I don't feel weird mentioning some of the names. I'm not going to mention the grades, but they did Java was the base of the blend, which as an espresso blender, I wouldn't think Java, and then an Ethiopia, like your traditional blend, and then I think it was a Colombia. But Java being the base was something that stood out for me and made me want to start playing with Indos for espresso blending, which has been interesting so far.
I feel like I noticed Mike reaching for his microphone just a few moments ago.
Any roaster that I've ever been involved with at a level where I had insight into their sales, their best-selling SKUs are blends.
Oh yeah,
and if they have a blend that doubles up as an espresso, it can be espresso or blend. It's going to be more than 50% of their sales. I can guarantee it.
I 100% agree. You think about like where would Intelligentsia be without Black Cat? Where would Stumptown be without Hairbender? Now they do plenty of other great coffees, but most people, that's what they know. That's what sticks with them.
Oh, there are certainly the coffees that you can say the name of the coffee in any specialty coffee circle and you know who the roaster is.
Right.
It's interesting that you can go to a grocery store or at this stage at like a Target or, similar, and you can buy the world's best coffee, quote unquote.
Award-winning.
On any shelf, floor to ceiling, left to right, at any price point in the range that's offered, right?
Right.
And it's just like something to think about. It's not that marketing doesn't have accountability to like, hey, it's not that there's not like accountability to the customer. When you market well, you will reap the benefits of it. I mean to say more, you can make claims around coffee quality all day long, no matter what you're putting into a bag. Even health claims and stuff in most cases. And these are not necessarily accountable or substantiated or what have you. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I had, years ago wrote an article on how to deal with sort of unethical competitors. And I told a story of walking into a grocery store and it says on the bag, it's a 12-ounce bag of whole bean coffee, and it says, we source the best coffees in the world.
Yeah.
And it was $3.50.
Right.
And there's no way that could be true. There's no way, but as to your point, there's no accountability at that level.
And the consumer is going to pick up the two next to each other and have to ask themselves the question through a lens of insight that in most cases they probably wouldn't have. And not any shame on them. It's like, especially in a market where you're very separate from coffee's origin and process. And the question is, well, wait a minute, why would I pay X dollars more for coffee that was sourced from the best coffee in the world compared to coffee that was sourced from the best coffee in the world? Like, wow, okay, great, what a deal,
Yeah, I would argue that the statement, we source the finest coffees from around the globe, is the most ubiquitous statement. Everybody en masse should drop that because nobody's paying attention to that statement anymore. The one that stuck out for me, which I thought was hilarious, somebody posted on Instagram, come try the sandwich Mike D on Yelp said was the worst sandwich he ever had. That, I think, has legs. Making fun of your own ubiquitous statement, I think, has merit.
Nice.
And I thought it could be that it was the best coffee available after all the specialty coffee buyers had come through.
Yeah.
Hey, best is an interesting concept.
That is true.
Yeah. I mean, no matter how you cut it, blending, I was going to shoot us. That's a hard thing to do. I'm going to back away. I think that you have to, as a specialty roaster, strongly consider whether it is by a multi origin blend or not, you have to engage how this type of coffee occupies a place in your program. It is your biggest sledgehammer waiting to bear for your growth, and certainly in harder times as we all navigate what is a very precarious market. You're going to have to utilize all of the tools in each of those buckets you so well presented for us, Mark.
Do you have any buckets to add? Did I leave anything out, Todd? Because I often...
No, you always come very well prepared. I think that those three lenses, buckets, however you like to express it, I mean, those are the things, right? It's having identity as a company, it's having character as a product, it's having, a savings lever or a cost value lever that you can deliver your quality at the utmost for, the price targets you need to hit depending on the type of space you're selling into. Grossly oversimplified after we've already explored all the nooks and crannies. But yeah, I think that it's dubious to leave this particular part of the specialty coffee space unexplored as a roaster. I don't know how in 2025 you can completely avoid, but I would love to hear about it. I'm sure you would too. Please do reach out if you have countering opinions, or you feel like the blend is a thing of the past. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and as well, we will be recording live from the floor of the SCA show in Houston in the coming weeks. I've already lined up a number of interviews, and if you are going to be attending that show and want to be interviewed, please email us. We had a lot of fun last year, the three of us, with some of the curveballs I enjoyed throwing at the panel. But this year, I want to top what we were doing last year. So.
Well, and we're going to be fully mobile. So we're going to be on the move. When we say we'll come find you, that is 100% true.
We will literally come find you.
On the move throughout the show, hoping to cover great new and exciting things. Also hoping to just touch base with people who should be heard in specialty coffee. So if you feel that's you,
reach out. We won't be in our ivory tower this year, detached from the masses. We will be of the people, for the people.
Of the people, for the people. What'd you have for lunch today, Mark? A steak.
Steak and a medium-bodied Cabernet.
Nice. Yeah, well, hey, Mark, as always, it's been a wonderful pleasure to join you here. I love doing this show. I never tire of thanking you and, of course, Mike for the opportunity. Thank you to all the listeners who continue to turn up and support, and we will look forward to unpacking yet another hot topic in future episodes of The Exchange.
Toodles!
What was that?
You've been listening to the Exchange Coffee Podcast, part of the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network, brought to you by Kavoya Specialty Coffee, where coffee is always a collaborative voyage. The Exchange is hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey and produced by me, Mike Ferguson. Our free use theme music for this episode is The Best Recipe by Crab Audio. Remember, you can always email me at mike.ferguson@kavoya.com. Thanks for listening, and now, your postscript.
When I was 11, in an effort to get me out of the house more, my mom signed me up for a mixed nuts bowling league. I was the youngest bowler by probably 50-something years. And outside of me at 11, most of my teammates were in their mid-60s. It was fun. I had a great time. But I had to actually get an American Bowling Association card and own shoes, own ball. Yeah.